Good afternoon, everyone. This is Betsy Gans, and on behalf of the Regional Administration Department, I'd like to thank you for joining the webinar today. If you're logged into the online portion of the webinar, please enter your PIN, which appears on the right-hand side of your computer screen just beneath the phone number. So here are the objectives for today's webinar. We're going to review the goals and agenda for the regional meetings, present the proposals on the discussion agenda from the Histocompatibility Committee and the Pancreas Transplantation Committee, and have a question and answer period following each presentation. We're also going to review ways to submit feedback. Please keep in mind that these proposals will also be presented, discussed, and voted on at the regional meetings this fall. The regional meetings will continue to serve as the formal means of contributing to regional discussion and voting on public comment proposals. The primary function of regional meetings is to provide an opportunity for members to discuss proposed policy and bylaws changes, and the feedback received during the meetings is provided to the OPTN committees, the regional counselor, and the board member for consideration during discussions at the Board of Directors meetings. Members in attendance at the regional meetings receive information about current OPTN and UNOS activities presented by the UNOS executive staff, and are updated about new and ongoing committee activities by regional representatives. Regional business is also discussed, and attendees have the opportunity to network with colleagues in their region. So the proposals were distributed for public comment on August 3rd. The 3 proposals placed on the regional meeting discussion agenda will be presented, discussed, and voted on during the regional meeting. And the remaining 2 proposals and guidance document are on the non-discussion section of the regional meeting agendas. The proposals on the non-discussion agenda will not be presented or discussed at the regional meeting, but a vote will be taken on each to provide guidance to the counselor during discussions at the board meeting. A national webinar non-discussion agenda was held last week. The webinar was recorded and can be viewed on the OPTN and Transplant Pro websites. 2 of the discussion agenda proposals, one from the Histocompatibility Committee and one from the Pancreas Committee, will be discussed on today's webinar, and you can see those proposals on your screen. A second national webinar to review the discussion agenda will be held on Tuesday, August 21st from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, and the proposal presented during that webinar will be Frameworks for Organ Distribution, and that is sponsored by the Ad Hoc Geography Committee. The link to register for the webinar can be found on the Transplant Pro website under the Education tab. And these webinars are recorded, and links to the recordings will be posted to Transplant Pro a few days after the webinar. Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kathy Murphy. She will present the proposal from the Histocompatibility Committee, and Dr. Murphy is the chair of that committee. And Dr. Murphy, we've unmuted your phone line.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. Appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity to give this presentation concerning the upcoming or the public comment addressing HLA typing errors. Next slide. So the problem concerns the entry of HLA typing errors into UNET for deceased donors and the consequences of the data entry errors. First and foremost, we know that there's a safety risk to the patient, and if we use the HLA typing for virtual cross-matching, as we do for a lot of the high PRA and import offers, and we are basing our virtual cross-matching on an incorrect typing error, we know that if it's brought in and the patient is actually at a physical cross-match, then this is the most deleterious of consequences for incorrect typing. But there's also the problems with incorrect entry for heart patients and other multi-organ that often rely on the HLA typing without a physical cross-match to accept these organ offers. And the second or other consequences that can arise from incorrect typing errors are increases in cold ischemia time. And while we're waiting for retyping of these errors, then the organs accumulate more cold ischemia time, or could actually increase the discard rate if the cold ischemia time is too long. But another inefficiency or problem with the HLA entry data is missed transplant opportunities, and this can go either way. So if patients have unacceptable antigens that are entered but are not screened off, then we could import offers for these patients. But also, conversely, if our patients have no unacceptable antigens to that donor for the correct typing but are screened off because the typing is incorrectly entered, then these patients have a missed opportunity. And for some of our very highly sensitized patients, this could be a tremendous disadvantage. So next slide, please. So the proposed solutions, the first solution is to have the HLA data entered manually into UNet twice, but by the same person. So this isn't going to increase the burden in the laboratory by having two different people in at the same time, but just the same person enters into the data, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. And then the members must have a process for verifying the data that's loaded directly into UNet. And currently there's a couple of different software programs that are used predominantly by the OPOs that allow for direct data transfer from the software into UNet. So they will have to develop a process for verifying that the data is correct before it gets uploaded into UNOS. And lastly, but also very importantly, is that we would like to mandate that raw HLA data typing, and this is not the HLA reports that just have the typing of the donor on the report, but the actual raw worksheets themselves be attached and uploaded under the attachments for verification of our lab results. And this has a multifold purpose. First, we can check for allele level antibodies or typing that looks like it might be an allele level for our patients that have allele level antibodies where that can't be currently entered into UNet. Then we can also go in and look at the HLA typing according to these worksheets and not base it necessarily on the data that was entered into UNet for accepting import offers, particularly for those transplant centers that are utilizing virtual cross-matching and not a physical cross-match to go to transplant. So if we have that raw data in there, then we can actually do a second check and verification for our patients. Next slide, please. So how will we implement this proposal? First, we need our members to be educated and to understand the new requirements of the double entry and how that they are going to implement this within their own laboratory. We need that the labs to work with the OPO and the transplant centers to look at their written agreements. We're all required to have these joint agreements between transplant centers and OPOs and transplant centers and laboratories, and see how they are going to implement this raw data worksheet upload into UNet. And then the OPOs must ensure a process be in place for submitting the source documentation, whether it's going to be the lab that uploads the data or it's going to be the OPO that uploads the data. All of these will need to be worked out in advance to make this a smooth transition. So next slide. So this is what the data entry process is going to look like. So the first user is going to enter all the HLA data, and then the screens are going to all of the data is going to be deleted. So they'll have to re-enter all the data for a second time. And as they're entering the data, if there is a difference between the data fields between the first entry and the second entry, then that's going to be flagged. And the entries, a flag will come up and say these fields were not identical, so that the user will have to go back in and re-enter the data the second time. And if the fields all match from the first set entry to the second set entry, then the data is saved and it is validated. If the data is all entered correctly from the first to the second time, then no entry, there will not be a flag, and so all the data is saved, and that moves on to the correct information. So it won't be an onerous process for having a second person to have to verify it like ABOs, but it will be a check so that hopefully this will not allow clerical errors to, or clear all the clerical errors from happening for this double entry system. So next slide. So how will we implement this proposal? First, the OPTN is going to program and implement this double entry model for all the HLA fields into UNet. And I should note that they're also doing another behind the scenes programming that I don't know if many of you noticed, but there was an opportunity if you were scrolling over the match run page, and not intentionally, but you moved over the HLA typing and you just hit that field and scroll down, that you could actually change the HLA typing on the match run page. So the IT has now locked down those fields, so you won't be able just to scroll over and incidentally change the HLA typing on the match run page, but you will have the opportunity to go back into the HLA page and change or edit the data in there if it's necessary. So those are two programming changes that UNOS is going to make. And then the Histo Committee, and along with UNOS and OPTN, are going to educate their members to this for the raw data and to the double entry system. Hopefully that this will take care and make a smooth transition for implementing this new system. And next slide.
Great, thank you, Kathy. For anybody who has a question, you can click on the hand feature on the right-hand side of your computer screen, and we will unmute your phone line and call your name. Please remember also to unmute your own line so that we can hear you. And as a reminder, you can visit the OPTN website to submit a comment on any of the proposals that are out for public comment, and the website address is at the bottom of your screen.
So, Kathy, we have quite a few questions. I'm going to go to Rio Hirose first. And Rio, I've unmuted your phone line.
Hey, thanks. Just one background question, one practical question. Is this sort of a mistyping or mistranscription of HLA as a result of the comment, or does the HLA committee know what the incidence of these are?
Oh, yes, we know. We've been tracking these errors since 2015. That's one of the tasks that we are assigned by the board. And so by quarter, we have actually broken down the error rate. And originally, it looks like the error rate over to the right-hand side for 2015 looks pretty high at 2.2% and even higher in 2016. But these errors were categorized by anything that didn't match between two different sets of typings. And so it could have been an allele level error versus an antigen, meaning somebody reported O2 and the next lab reported O201, and that counted it as a discrepancy. So when we went back in 2017, we changed that to what we considered to be critical discrepancies, which were the ones that had the potential to affect match run allocation or matching. So you could see it brought the rate down, but not low enough.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing is, I was wondering, I'm in support of this proposal for sure, but is UNOS and the labs work on an interface where the source data is actually entered automatically into DonorNet, or at least a similar template or a very universal source data format, so all the source data looks exactly the same for both transplant centers and receiving labs, so that we can quickly look at the HLA alleles and the antibody profiles for specific recipients?
Yes. So to the first part of your question, we are definitely looking at some kind of interface and a download between the HLA laboratories where they could download their software to UNet, but that's going to require a lot more work on both the vendors that provide software to the HLA labs and also on the side of UNOS so that they can develop a system like you're talking about, where it's consistent to where everybody can upload it, whether it's via something like Excel or an HL7 interface or something like that. So that's going to be a little bit more complicated and probably going to take some more time. But I think that the other problem about looking the same is that unfortunately not all the HLA labs are running the same methodology. So the raw data worksheets won't look the same if somebody's running SSO versus RT-PCR versus SSP. Those aren't all going to look the exact same. So until we get that interface, we might just have to educate who's ever going to be looking at that as to what the results would be.
Thanks very much.
Sure.
Okay, another question that was typed in. Double entry probably will reduce clerical errors, but there are important errors in HLA data interpretation that result in incorrect typing. How will this be addressed by this proposal?
That's absolutely correct, and those won't be addressed by this particular solution. We have other means that we're working on, which is, one is some education. We're also thinking about other types of IT solutions. For example, if you entered a DR7 with a DQ9 that looks like a null haplotype, and you put in a DRW53 positive, there may be a pop-up box that says, do you really want to move forward? Do you want to check your results? Are you sure of that typing? Or something of that nature that would actually spur somebody on to actually look at the typing again. And then we're working on reporting in more real time the error rates for each individual laboratory, and if there's a particular error that one lab is making in, say, the null haplotypes or in the some other associations, then we can individually educate each individual laboratory. So there are some other solutions that we're working on, but they also require more IT and more working solutions than we were able to come up with at this particular time, just because of the resources and the allocation of resources.
Okay, we have a question from Derek Good, and I've unmuted your line.
Hi, Kathy. We definitely think the double entry HLA is going to be beneficial, but we're wondering if we'd have the option of having two separate people actually do the check.
We did actually discuss this quite a bit in the committee, but there are, we felt like that there were many small labs that actually come in to do deceased donor typing, where this would be an onerous burden on those particular centers. So we thought that at least this would give a front line to reducing errors, and we would like to monitor this and see what the metrics are after we implement this. And then if it's not reduced, then you know, maybe implement something else. But our long-term goal would be to actually have data upload, and so that there's no clerical entry whatsoever.
Yeah, that sounds good. But I mean, would we have the option to do this? I kind of understand not putting on an extra burden, but would it be something we could do if we choose to?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could have one person enter the HLA type, and if another person's there, have them go back in and enter the second HLA type, and then just click submit and see if they match.
Okay, cool.
Okay, another question was typed in. Does this requirement only apply to deceased donor typing or also for living donors and transplant candidates?
Currently, this is only for deceased donors. We did find that there is another level of error rate for the live donors and the patients, but those mostly came on the recipient histopathology and the donor histocompatibility forms, and sometimes within even the same center, entering the donor twice or the recipient twice. While this is important, we thought that the first pass would be much more important to do the deceased donors where allocation is actually taking place.
Hi, this is Allison Wilhelm. I'm the liaison to the Histo Committee. Thanks, Kathy, for giving this proposal. I did just want to mention that in the this proposal that went out, we did actually frame it so that it might, so that it would be for all HLA entered into UNIT. So I know we had focused on deceased donor typing a lot when we were looking at these reports, but it is actually proposed to be in all systems in UNIT, so waitlist, DonorNet, TIDAD, KB, all those systems. So if during public comment you wanted to submit a comment in favor or not in favor of that and just focus on users, that's an option. We just wanted to give that that update so that the proposal does actually cover all HLA entered into UNIT anywhere in UNIT.
Okay, we have a question from Ken Shaven, and Ken, I've unmuted your phone line. Dr. Shaven, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a question?
No, I think I hit the wrong button.
It's okay. Thank you. All right. So let's see. We have a question from William Freeman, and I'm going to unmute your phone line.
Yes, if I understand it, there's at least two locations where data are entered. One's the user, the other is the lab. So what do the labs do when they're entering the original data to eliminate or to minimize clerical errors?
Well, so it really depends upon what technology they're using. A lot of labs have automatic downloads from the original typing methodology from either Fusion or from SCORE or the SureTyper, whatever system that they're using. They have automatic downloads that directly deposit the information from the machine into their software, say into HistoTrack. So that data is actually not been touched. And then the errors or the data gets entered from the software system, either from the lab or from the OPO, and that's another issue that we were addressing, because sometimes it's not the lab that enters the data into UNIT, sometimes it's the OPO itself. So education on all parts, and then this data entry will definitely help cutting down on the clerical errors part of it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I support the proposal. I was just wondering if there were additional or better, or whatever term you want to use, procedures that higher up on the earlier in the chain of events that use, whether that should be considered by UNOS.
Absolutely. I mean, there definitely is. The ultimate solution would be transferring the data directly from either the machine that generates the results or the lab software that's been dumped into there directly into UNIT, is to have an electronic upload, which will require no clerical entry whatsoever. And we're definitely looking into feasibility studies for that, but it's going to require programming both on our vendor side, which we will need to encourage to do, and also onto UNIT's side and UNO side to be able to house that data or to pull it in. So it's just a matter of time and resources.
Thank you. Just one last question. If you haven't already, are you, or is UNOS thinking of setting a deadline, have that happen, some sort of a timeline? Because obviously that is the best solution.
Well, I can let them answer that, but I think that everything's kind of a little sidetracked due to the resources being pulled over to geography. So I'm not sure we actually have a timeline for that yet, but you can rest assured that it is high on our priority list.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Silke Niederhaus, who will present the Pancreas Program Functional Inactivity Proposal on behalf of the Pancreas Transplantation Committee. Dr. Niederhaus is the vice chair of that committee, and we have unmuted your phone line.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Silke Niederhaus. I'm the vice chair of the Pancreas Transplant Committee, and I get to present the Pancreas Program Functional Inactivity Proposal today. Next slide, please. So the first question is, what problems will this proposal solve? The current definition for Pancreas Program Functional Inactivity, it's defined as not performing at least one transplant in 6 months, encompasses small volume programs that should not be reviewed by the MPSC. It's also a definition that's too inflexible in reviewing small volume programs that do due diligence by their patients. 61 pancreas programs were reviewed by MPSC between 2011 and 2016 because of functional inactivity. This includes small programs that may have transplanted their patients very quickly, and the patients have short waiting times and good outcomes. Patient safety is the ultimate impetus for MPSC reviewing programs that are functionally inactive. And we believe that there are improvements that could be made in how programs communicate with patients about information regarding their own program and about other options in the area. Patient safety was a concern to us because 67% of patients who were listed at programs that were then declared functionally inactive were not relisted at another program. Next slide, please. Here you see some supporting evidence that we gathered. On the left side is kidney pancreas graft survival for the pancreas, and then the pancreas alone transplant pancreas graft survival. For this purpose, we defined small centers as centers who perform less than 2 transplants a year. There were 32 of them. Medium centers in green were defined as 3 to 4 transplants per year, and large centers were more than 4 transplants a year. There were 77 centers considered large centers. And as you can see, for both pancreas alone and kidney pancreas, there's a significant difference in pancreas graft survival being worse at small centers. This is, for us, important to note that this is true, likely because certain small centers have poor outcomes, and there are likely also certain small centers that have outcomes that are similar to medium or large programs. Our goal with this proposal was sort of trying to find a way to distinguish between those programs who do a very good job, even though they're small, and those who are struggling truly. These results were supported by 2 other recent papers. One was a study of the Eurotransplant region from 2008 to 2013, and another was analyzing United States pancreas center volume and comparing that with post-transplant outcomes. In both cases, it was found that while larger centers transplant riskier organs with higher PDRIs, they still have better outcomes compared to small volume programs. Next slide. So what are the proposed solutions? The solution was to hopefully reduce the MPSC review of functionally inactive pancreas programs by narrowing the review to programs that have both longer waiting times for their candidates and low transplant volumes. So our hope would be that pancreas programs should be reviewed if they fail to perform 2 transplants in 12 months. We believe that increases flexibility, and have an average waiting time above the national average for pancreas programs. So 2 in 12 months we think is just more flexible than 1 in 6. If you have 2 patients that present and they both list in January, one gets transplanted in February, one gets transplanted in March or April. If no other patients come for the rest of the year to be listed or transplanted, the program that has already done 2 transplants and was good in not delaying care for these patients should not get punished for being expeditious and caring for those patients. Furthermore, adding this waiting time metric would allow us to narrow the focus to small volume programs that list patients but then don't transplant their patients quickly. This solution also addresses concerns with patient communication needs and access to transplant by hopefully increasing communication with patients who are waitlisted at programs that are being reviewed for functional inactivity. So once programs are being reviewed for functional inactivity, they would need to inform patients and potential candidates about other pancreas programs that are in state or within 125 miles of the program. And then also they would need to provide information about their own program's waiting time compared to the national average. Providing this additional information should be a disincentive to small programs who sort of are slower in transplanting patients, and it should also empower patients to make informed decisions about their transplant care, and hopefully will increase the volume for the small programs and shorten waiting time for those patients to avoid sending this letter. Next slide. In the next slide, you'll see some more supporting evidence in regards to the waiting time. And again, the small programs are the 32 programs that have done less than 2 transplants a year. 29 medium programs do about 3 to 4 transplants a year, and 77 large programs did more than 4 transplants a year. They're on top. And you see very clearly that the waiting time differs, that the large programs have on average 8 months less waiting time for pancreas transplant. Next slide. How will members implement this proposal? Programs would be reviewed in this case only if they fail to meet the transplant threshold, which is 2 transplants in 12 months, and they would have to have a higher waiting time average than the national average. If a program is flagged for functional inactivity review, the letter that is currently sent to patients would have 2 additional elements, which would be information about any pancreas programs within 125 miles in state or in the United States territory, and it would have to list the program's average waiting time compared to the national average. Next slide. And implement this proposal. So research division will run a report indicating the national and program average waiting time for pancreas transplant candidates, and the OPTN will communicate with members the new requirements and policy notices in Transplant Pro. Waiting time will include both active and inactive candidates, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Niederhaus. To ask any questions, again, you can click on the hand feature on the right-hand side of your computer screen, and we will unmute your phone line and call your name. Try to remember to unmute your own phone line so we can hear you. And as a reminder, you can visit the OPTN website to submit a comment on any of the proposals out for public comment.
Okay, our first question is coming from Leanne Baxter-Lowe. And Leanne, I've just unmuted your phone line.
I'm sorry, I think that was a mistake.
Okay, that's all right, thank you. Donna Prime, I see that you have a question. Donna, I've unmuted your phone line.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I'm with the Iowa City VA, and you know, we have a network of 8 transplant programs in the country to, you know, for various organ transplantation. But the Iowa City VA is the only one that does pancreas. And we have a very low volume of pancreas transplants, and we have a very long wait. So this would definitely, you know, impact us greatly. We don't have any other place to send our patients for a pancreas transplant.
Right.
Not within the VA system anyway.
Right. And so your concern is being, you know, what would this thought is that hopefully by changing the current proposal, you should, if you're truly that low volume, you're probably already getting reviewed, because doing one, you know, transplant every 6 months, it should give you a little bit more freedom by doing 2 in 1 year. Our hope is not to close down programs that, you know, are unique in providing care. And indeed, we don't really want to close any programs. There's not that many pancreas programs, and a lot of patients already travel long distances to get where they need to go to get care. So I think the ultimate decisions will still be made by MPSC. And, our hope would be to encourage you to, continue to do whatever transplants need to be done. And the MPSC will definitely include other metrics in their review once they review pancreas programs for functional inactivity to see if, if things are okay or not okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of questions that have been typed in the system, and so the first one is, does this apply to only pancreas alone volumes and wait times, or do combined kidney and pancreas transplants meet the volume expectations?
Both combined. So anything that's a pancreas, if it's a kidney pancreas or a pancreas alone, if you do 2 KPs a year, you should be good.
Okay. Second question is, what is the process if there are no pancreas transplant programs within 125 miles of the listing center?
Right, then it becomes tricky, right, because it becomes a huge burden on patients to travel either out of state or a further distance. And some patients will have the resources to do that and some patients will not. But I think MPSC will have to take those kinds of things into account in terms of, what further should be. And sometimes there are insurance issues. If you have an insurance that's only accepted within one state and the next program is a state away, but they don't take your insurance. So I think all those kinds of factors need to be addressed on an individual basis, and we can't really make a universal policy that looks into that. Our hope is to review fewer programs to get a little bit off the smaller programs back that are doing a good job already, and then, the ones that need to speed up a little more, we'll continue to review them, but I don't think that in essence, things will change that much. Hopefully just fewer visits.
Hey, Sophie. This is Abby Fox. I'm the liaison to the Pancreas Committee. I just wanted to clarify, for the letter sent to patients, so if you're reviewed for having a low transplant threshold and a higher waiting time, the letter you send to patients informing them about other pancreas programs, if there aren't any in-state or within 125 miles, then you're not including the letter. So if that was what the question was about, you just don't have to include it if there aren't any.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Niederhaus, for presenting that proposal.
Sure.
I would like to point out that you can submit feedback on the public comment proposals on the OPTN website at the link that's on the screen. To encourage public participation and transparency, the public comment site publishes all the submitted comments. So in addition to posting a comment, you can also contact your regional administrator or your regional representative to the sponsoring committee. This slide contains a screenshot of where you can find that public comment page on the OPTN website. You just click on the governance tab at the top of the screen and you will be able to click on public comment and access the proposals. For reference, here's a list of the dates and locations corresponding to the fall 2018 regional meetings, and the meetings begin this week, actually tomorrow, and end on September 28th. The regional meeting dates, locations, and links to the meeting materials and agendas are located on the regional meetings page under the Community tab on the Transplant Pro website. And as a reminder, another webinar will be held on Tuesday, August 21st from 2 to 3. And the proposal presented during this webinar will be frameworks for organ distribution by the Ad Hoc Geography Committee. A link to register for the webinar can be found on the Transplant Pro and OPTN websites. And all of these webinars are recorded, and links to the recordings will be posted to Transplant Pro within a few days of the webinar being held. So in closing, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. You'll receive a survey about this webinar. It's just we'd really appreciate your participation and feedback, and we look forward to seeing you at the regional meetings. If you have any questions about regional meetings or today's webinar, please contact your regional administrator, and contact information is shown here on this slide on your screen. So thank you so much and have a great afternoon.